What's good, y'all? It's your boy HB Final Round. We're going to get into a little in-depth analysis of what happened last night with Jake Paul, Tyron Woodley, what each fighter should have done. We'll start off with Tyron Woodley. Look, a lot of y'all sitting here saying, well, Tyron, failed to let his hands go again. And fair enough. I do think he did, to a certain degree, fail to let his hands go, and he should have took a little bit more risk. But I kind of saw something last night, something very revealing about him. And it's kind of sad in a sense because I see a guy with so much potential, so much athletic ability still as a 40-year-old. And I realized that nobody's teaching this guy how to create openings. And this is why he's not letting his hands go. And fair enough, he shouldn't be letting his hands go if he's not doing it in a responsible manner. That's not his style. That's not the way he fights, is, being reckless. But unfortunately, this is probably why he lost his last 4 UFC fights and why he ended up losing, last night, is because nobody's teaching this man how to set shit up, how to create openings. All he knows, all he really does is he sits back and he waits for that moment to throw that big right hand of his. And that's great. Those openings will come throughout a fight. But if it's almost like you're just waiting to win the lottery. If you want to be a great fighter, okay, which he is, but if you want to, ultimately beat top tier fighters and be consistent in winning, you can't just wait for the one big shot all the time. Now, obviously in the UFC, he had a little bit more tools at his disposal, his wrestling, to kind of set it up a little bit more. But last night you saw that he wasn't given too many tools by his trainers to kind of utilize to learn how to create openings. And I think ultimately it shows why he struggled his last 4 UFC fights, because I don't think he has anybody in his ear kind of showing him how to create these openings. And if they did, I think Tyron looks significantly different in all these fights that he just lost. And I mentioned in my last video, it's like a recipe, man. You'd be surprised. Just one small ingredient missing can ruin the whole thing. It can ruin the whole thing. Like just missing a pinch of salt can change the whole dish. And I think Tyron Woodley had the right approach. He had the right idea. He did the right things. I thought he should have came out the way he did in the first 2 rounds and be patient, not get ahead of himself, not dive in and get countered by Jake Paul. He did a great job of that, with the exception of a couple blitzes that he kind of missed. Maybe he was nervous. But I thought he did the right thing. Be patient the first 2 rounds. Let's see what this guy has. Let's start making him think. Let's make him uncomfortable. Put him in a position he's never been before. You're not just going to get an easy knockdown or knockout with me. So he dragged it out. And then, he waited for the perfect opportunity to land a big punch. And he did. And he almost knocked him out. He almost knocked him down, at least I should say. But once again, is very similar to Jake Paul's kind of theme. Like, okay, what are you going to do when you can't get your opponent out of your face after one big punch? What are you going to do? What do you have to offer after that? And Jake Paul kind of showed he still can kind of string together shit. Unfortunately, he didn't have the cardio, but we'll get into that later. But Tyron Woodley, that's kind of his issue as well. It's like, okay, Tyron, we know you're a bad motherfucker. We know you got some heat to your punches, even with boxing gloves. But what happens when your opponent is able to weather that storm? What are you going to go to next? And it's not so much that he needs to let his hands go. He needs to take more risk and chances. He needs to be more aggressive. No, he needs to learn how to set shit up. Why did his trainers teach this man how to use a fucking jab? That would have made all the fucking difference. Hey, Tyron, double up to the head. Double that jab up to the head and step off. Not just, you got to teach him that shit. This dude is so gifted, has so much potential that I don't think he's utilizing. And I don't think it's his fault. I just think he doesn't have anybody who's kind of guiding him and showing him this shit. Double up on that jab, Tyron. Okay, go down to the body. Sneak one to the body. Double up to the head, sneak down to the body. Steal the wind. Okay, pivot out. You know, when you shoot that jab to the body, lower your level and then get it. You know, double up and then follow up with a combination. And that's when those openings start to come. Okay, it's established behind the jab. You know, if you have no jab in boxing, you're fighting with a blindfold on. You don't understand distance. You don't understand where you're at. You can't disrupt your opponent's timing. I understand that Tyron was a smaller fighter, but that's why you have to accentuate or make it a huge note to the fighter, like, hey, in order to get inside, in order to take advantage of openings, you need to do that through the jab. You need to work your way in. You know, that's what I would have done. Double up, maybe even triple up on the fucking jab. Jab, jab, jab. Okay, now you're stepping off with these jab. Now you're going to see some body shots, you know, across the body, hook to the head. It's simple shit. And even if you don't want to follow up, even if that's even too risky for Tyron, you know, just mixing it up to, hey, okay, fine, you don't want to follow up with a combination after you do a double jab. Okay, sneak one to the body. Just steal wind. Jake Paul was already tired as it was. Can you imagine if you're stealing wind from him with a jab? You're doing it consistently. You know, jab, come back to it, jab, get in, get out. You don't got to stick there. Tyron Woodley is athletic enough to where he can kind of utilize that lunging ability, not getting his head over his toes, but, you know, keeping all the weight on his back foot, stepping in, pulling out fast enough to where he's not getting countered, going down to the body. And then that's going to even create more openings because you keep on utilizing that jab, you know, jab to the body, you know, mix it up to the head, boom. As you're pulling back, you might draw your opponent to you, and now you can throw that right hand. You know, you're pulling your opponent out. Passive aggressiveness. Apologize, I got the Rona. You know, or if you're not going to throw the jab, you could have one of his trainers could have said feint. Feint. You got to utilize your feints. The feint is so beautiful because it's so efficient. It doesn't expend much energy. You throw your opponent's timing and rhythm off, you know, and you can set up your own shit. You know, if I'm Tyron Woodley's trainer, I'm like, yo, feint your way in. You know, that's all you need to do. You know, you get your back to the ropes or corner, feint him before you turn out. You know, if you're getting Jake Paul, his back to the ropes or the corner, feint him and then go. You know, feint your way in. That works your opponent mentally and physically in terms of his conditioning. Now imagine if you take the jab in the feint, you throw that in Tyron Woodley's game last night, and you impose it, and you come up with a game plan. How much do you think that would have impacted the fight? How more tired would have Jake Paul been if you're landing jabs to the body and you're also feinting him? Because this is what happens when you feint an opponent, especially somebody inexperienced. What do? They jump back. It's like, oh shit. Yeah, that takes energy. You know, and it takes energy mentally because they're thinking, oh my God, my opponent's coming in. I better get ready. I better block this. You know, and especially what Tyron should have done, you know, especially in that first few rounds, it's just like feint. See what's Jake gonna do? Does Jake jump back? Does Jake stay there? Does he jump back and then come back into range? Does he attack you after you feint him? What does he do? You know, you want to read these things, and then you start seeing a pattern. So let's say Jake jumps back. Okay. He keeps on jumping back every time you feint him. Now you know, like, okay, I'm not going to rush in. I don't need to rush in because he's just going to jump out of range. So we'll keep feinting him. Let's see the response. Okay, he keeps on jumping out. And then eventually Jake Paul picks up, and he's like, oh, well, he's just feinting me. He's not going to attack me. And then let's say you feint him again, and now Jake Paul's saying, well, he's not going to attack me. I'm just going to stand right here. Well, that's when Tyron Woodley can now launch his attack. Follow up behind the jab. Okay, he's not expecting it. Boom. You know, or let's say every time you feint Jake Paul, he steps out and he steps back in. Well, when Jake Paul steps out after you feint him and he steps back in, now that's when you launch your own attack, and you're exponentially increasing your power because as he's jumping back into range, you have bombs waiting for him. You have combos waiting for him. Or you at least have one punch waiting for him, and he's running into it. You know, now if you figure out, okay, every time I feint him, he's attacking me. Well, that's when you step back and you land that big right hand. Once again, you're using his leverage and his movement to walk him into a punch, and he doesn't see it coming. You know, it's a simple gesture, man. That feint that Tyron Woodley could have used, he could have done so much with it. And that's how you create openings. That's how you read your opponent. And that's how you see what you have available to you. But just standing in front of there, you know, following him, stalking him around the round, that's okay. You can do that. That could be effective, but you have to do it proactively. You know, you have to do it behind the jab. Okay, you know, you got to feint him, keep him guessing, mirror him. You know, you can't just fucking stand there in front of him and just wait the counter. You got to mix it up. You got to show different. That's the story of boxing, is this, like, it's a chess match. And that's the thing for Woodley. He has to understand it's a chess match. It's not checkers. You know, you have to set up moves. You have to be 3 steps ahead of your opponent, maybe even more. And then you do it silently. You know, you don't show your moves. You don't do it through pure aggression unless that's just what you do. So I don't blame Tyron Woodley. He fought a smart fight, but nobody's showing him how to create those openings. You know, simple jab would have created those openings in this fight. Now, obviously, you face a very good boxer. You have to pull all this shit together, and you have to do a lot more, right? You're going to need a lot more than just a jab and a feint. But in this fight with Jake Paul, it would have taken him a long way. Another thing is head movement. Tyron Woodley's too athletic to not understand how to utilize head movement. Instead of just, you know, following your opponent, you know, forward, you know, use your head movement. This is also where you create openings. You know, you stalk your opponent, use your head movement, okay? Right here, this is where you find those countering opportunities. This is where you create those openings. You slip to the left, okay? And you gotta activate that head movement as you're coming forward, as you're closing the distance, as you're cutting off the ring. You're putting pressure, you're putting mental pressure on your opponent, and you're staying in his grill, you're staying in his face, you're staying in position, you're being defensively responsible, and now you're creating openings, because every time you close that distance and you're utilizing your head movements, you know, your opponent is throwing punches at you. So when you slip to the left, he might throw a jab. Okay, I got the left hook to the body, left hook to the head. You know, or maybe I slipped across, boom, boom, boom. You know, I slip right. You know, I avoid a jab, uppercut. You know, right hand, right hook. You know, that's how you create those openings, head movement. That's one. If you ain't gonna use the fucking jab, if you ain't gonna use the fucking feint, then use the head movement. And you'll see those opportunities. Like, that's how you let your hands go. It's hard to let your hands go, especially if you're a smart guy, but you don't know how to create those openings. He didn't do the wrong thing. Okay, was he gun shy? Yes, because Tyron Woodley's smart. He understands that he shouldn't be taking unnecessary shots. But unfortunately, he doesn't know how to set up shit. And I think that's the fault of his trainers in the UFC and the trainers that he had for this boxing match. You know, stalk your opponent, that's fine. But move your head, move your head. That's where those openings start to come in. And you find that rhythm and flow. Boom, boom. You know, pull counter, bang. You got to move your head. So ultimately, where Tyron Woodley failed is that he didn't incorporate, you know, small little ingredients to his game plan to create those openings to let his hands go. I don't think that's his fault. I think that's his trainer's fault. But it is kind of his responsibility. Like, dude, if you want to be all-time great, if you want to win matches like this, you have to do your homework. You know, I learned a lot of my shit on my own from studying the sport on my own, not through trainers. But, you know, if you're at that level, you should be having somebody in your corner telling you this shit. So the reason why the MO is still out on Tyron Woodley, that he doesn't let his hands go, he's not taking risk, is because he doesn't know how to. He doesn't know how to, and that's just not his style. He's not a reckless fighter. He just doesn't know how to set shit up. And as a result, it leaves him in that position. And it's unfortunate because he's so talented. So that was kind of the story of Tyron Woodley last night. Tell me what you think. Like the video, subscribe, comment below. What should Tyron did what should he done last night? Get at me.